let's talk about pacing romance inside of your novel. This week, we got a question on the YouTube channel from somebody who's writing a retelling. And inside of the original story, the characters are very much together. There's a lot of romance. And inside of their story, they're eventually writing to that point, but there's not a lot of romance just yet. So how do you convincingly write a love story? Now, the fans go crazy over the romance in my novels. And one of the things that's really important is that you're doing little breadcrumbs along the way. Even if your characters do not get together until the end, you can and should be dropping little nuggets to allow readers to understand that's where we're going. Just because we know that this is where it's going doesn't mean they're going to be able to pick up along the way. Now, readers are really smart. They will get the subtle little clues that you are leaving. Readers are supposed to be smarter than your characters. Your characters might not know that they're supposed to be in love, might not know that they're going to get together until the end of the story, and that's okay. But the readers are the ones looking in on this story. They need to know that eventually we're getting to that point. I had an author friend once who wrote a story who was supposed to have that story end in romance, and her editors came back to her shocked at the end because the characters all of a sudden were face to face with each other. And they had not seen it coming. They did not know that there was going to be romance in the novel because she didn't put those breadcrumbs along the way. She had to go back and rewrite things into the novel to lead readers to believe when they finally started making out, right? If they just randomly go through the entire book and just all of a sudden get together, that's going to be shocking and surprising and not believable. So let's go back. You know that you're working toward this anchor point. What are some little things we can drop along the way? Now, it doesn't matter if you're starting a romance early on or later in the book. You are doing little things to lead up to that. There are things in love stories that people focus on. What types of things do we focus on? Think about the TV shows you watch, the movies you watch, the books you read. Think about the subtle signals that we're starting to get where we figure out, oh, it's these two characters. These two are going to get together. We're going to see them get together inside of this story. Maybe it's a love triangle and you don't know which person it's going to be. Maybe there are lots of options, or maybe you don't set it up as a romance, but we're going to start getting those clues. What little things can we do? The way somebody looks at each other, the feelings, right? We love to talk about the senses, especially with romance. We have lots of videos on how to write like really good kissing scenes and romance scenes and all those things. Go watch those. That's going to be really valuable information to you. Your goal is to really bring in those senses. So when there's a little bit of a flirty atmosphere, what changes? What's a bit different? The way that people's eyes are, right? Their eyes dilate when they see someone who's attractive to them. The way that they touch their hair, the way that they look down, the way that they look up, the way that they smile, the way that their voice changes, the way that their voice cracks a little bit or gets a little bit quieter, or the way that their standing changes. Even the stance of how they are doing things can change. We hear a lot on the internet, especially on like TikTok, where people are talking about body language, that if people are interested in somebody, their feet are going to point toward them and their shoulders are going to point toward them. Even if they're looking somewhere else, they're going to be naturally pulled toward that person. So what can you do? You do not have to have it so that it's a very clear physical reaction. You do not have to have it so that it's a very clear physical reaction. You can do something where they're going to spark a little bit. It doesn't have to be lovey-dovey and flirty and all of those things. You can make them spark a little bit. If they don't like each other, we're going to get the idea it's going to be enemies to lovers, right? We want to make sure that we're dropping little breadcrumbs. So your characters will have to interact. If they don't interact, they don't know each other. They can't make decisions and they can't eventually get together. So they have to have some sort of connection, something. And even if you have to have some kind of intermediary between them, like, you know, their friends are setting these characters up or something, you have to have some way for them to see each other, learn about each other, understand each other, even if they're not in the same room, even if they're not in the same place. If I sat here and I told you about somebody who is really cool and that kind of piqued your interest a little bit, we've got something. Even though you haven't met that person, even though you don't know who they are, you haven't seen them, you haven't been in the room with them, you now have some way of feeling about them. As you learn about a character, as you learn about a person, you will start to make judgments on whether or not you're going to be connected, friends, not friends, enemies, eventual lovers, all of those things. So what can we do to start introducing them to each other, even if they're not on the page together? You have to come up with some way for them to engage, to learn, to interact, and we need to start putting little breadcrumbs in. It can start off with just some kind of little snappy comment in a conversation, and then they go away, and then eventually they come back and they have more conversations. We're building up little by little. So it needs to start small. It doesn't need to be love at first sight. Mostly we don't like love at first sight. I do occasionally write love at first sight, but then I'll rip my characters apart. That's a vicious, evil thing to do, but you can do that. And then you can have to like figure out how they work together. If you had them together real quick and then you pulled them apart, now they have to relearn all those things. They have to figure out what they actually saw, what they actually meant by those things. So you're doing small and you're building up from there. Little things, a touch, a glance, the way that they're looking at each other, those things are then going to lead to more contact. And that can be conversational, it can be physical, it can be just in the same proximity as each other. You're going from a little to a little more, to a little more, to a little more, to a lot more until we get to those romantic elements, right? So we have to start small and build up. And you should have multiple touch points for those connections along the way. I do not want you to have one thing at the beginning and then 3 things at the end. That doesn't give us any continuity. You have to build it up slowly. You have to build to that crescendo, right? So if you want your characters to make out at the end of the story or in the middle of the story or when they actually get together, you want to have some like big romantic moment, you have to have the small seeds leading up to that. So you have to have things there that got us to that point. Now, if you're writing and you feel like, but I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do this, you don't have to start in this place. You can actually start in the middle of the story. Sometimes I don't want to build up a relationship. I just want them to be in a relationship. And so I start with my characters in a relationship. If you look at my the Conspiracy of Jack Frost novel, they've already started in a relationship. Jack Frost and Genesis are together. They have been through the glances and the smiles and the flirting and the first hand touch, and they've been through all of this. I don't have to explain it to you. They're already connected. So you can start your book in a place where these characters know each other, understand each other, and are almost together or are together at the beginning of the book. And then you have to, of course, rip them apart and eventually put them back together. But you don't have to start building up and getting there because you're already there. You just have to show us that they're already in that place. But you can, if you're just introducing the characters, if they have not met before, if you're not dropping into the middle of their story and you're starting from the beginning of their story, now you have to have the small little things that lead up to the big romance. So what can you do? Start thinking these things through. Write down everything you can think of, the small little things to the medium things to the big things. Write a list. Categorize these things. The glances, the flirting, the conversation, the smiles, the twisting of the hair, the changing of how they dress to impress the person. Those are all small things, right? The asking questions to the mutual friend. Small things. The medium things is where they're in the same room and they're like bumping arms and they're kind of flirting with each other and having longer conversations, the medium level things. And then we get to the big things where it is very, very clear that they're trying very, very hard not to make out, right? So categorize those things and then decide which of those you want to use. You don't have to use them all, but list everything you can think of in the small, the medium, and the big sized things that can help you to decide how you're going to define their relationship. Your goal here is to give us those breadcrumbs and to let the audience know before the characters know. The audience should always know before the characters know that they're gonna be together. You want them to root for them. You want them to say, you're so ridiculous. How did you not see that? How are you not seeing that they're clearly in love with you? You want them to be ready to rip their hair out, and then you give them exactly what they want. The almost kiss and then eventually the kiss, right? So start with your small. Build up to your bigger things. Give them time, give them room to breathe, give them that physical proximity, and the more they are getting closer to this point, the more proximity they're going to need, even if it is not necessarily in the same physical space, if it's in dreams, if it's in whatever, you are getting them to the point where they're spending more and more time in each other's atmospheres so that they can see more of each other and develop those feelings. And by the end of the book, you will have a more believable romance. If you get to the end of the book and all of a sudden everybody's kissing and they really haven't been near each other, you're going to have to go back and do some heavy lifting like my friend did and rewrite some things to make sure we're seeing those little nuggets along the way so that we can fully believe that, yes, they really did get together because they were meant to be together, because we want them to be together, and not because we got to the end of the novel and oops, we were supposed to have something in there and they just tossed people together. questions on this, go ahead and drop it down below. We are here to help you with your writing. I bring in experts all the time, lots of other multi-time best-selling authors just like me. All of my friends are here. We love to give you advice and to help you with what you're doing. So if you've got questions on your writing, now's the time to drop it. Every single day we are releasing brand new episodes to help you with your publishing, to make this your most profitable year ever, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to save you time and effort and stress and make you more money so you can live your best life while also living out your author dreams. We'll see you in the upcoming episodes.